So, quick story. A few nights ago, I had a bit of a panic moment. I thought the worst had happened, that the dreaded COVID-19 virus had broken into our home somehow. Ben was sitting quietly in his wheelchair, and out of nowhere, he started showing this painful look on his face, and really unhappy sounds were coming from him, almost like a cry. And he never cries, only when he's sick. I felt his forehead. It was warm. I tried not to let on to his caregiver that I had this gut-wrenching, awful feeling building inside of me. If Ben had the virus, that would be absolutely horrible. I don't think I have to explain why. And in that panic moment, the biggest thing I worried about was the intense shortness of breath and suffocating feeling that so many people are talking about. And how terrifying that is, and how that would affect Ben. That would be horrible. And then I thought, even if the virus doesn't affect him in a bad way, we'd still have to go into quarantine and lock everybody out as caregivers for the next 2 weeks. And then they'd probably have to quarantine themselves to not expose their families. And if they weren't around and either Jan or I got sick, my God, what would we do? And then what if we actually had to go to the hospital at some point? You know, it's one thing to spend a night in the ER pre-COVID-19, but going to a hospital today would be absolutely terrible. PPEs all around, just like in the movie Contagion. Because of course, when the top health experts in the world, like Dr. Tony Fauci and Dr. Theresa Tam, they tell us that there's no real treatment, it's a nightmare scenario. That makes me want to throw up. During those brief moments when my mind was just spinning out of control, I also had the pain of guilt that we'd somehow failed Ben, because he relies on us for everything, including his safety. When he was in the tub that night, I was able to get control of my irrational mind and realize, you know what, he didn't have COVID-19. He was actually having severe muscle cramps in his legs and shoulders, which he does every now and then. And that was because he hadn't been to his physio appointments for the last several weeks. He needs them every week. So no, he's not sick, thank God. And neither is anyone else in our household. But I can tell you for those 20 to 30 minutes, the fear and anxiety was all consuming. Then earlier today, I read a Facebook post from a friend where she talked about her pandemic reflections and how she's been waking up in the middle of the night and the fear that comes along with all of that. In a way, my panic attack was to be expected sooner or later, I guess. I mean, everyone's on edge. It's everywhere. We're all scared. We're all worried. We're tired of staying home all the time. Even Chris Cuomo, who's a prominent CNN journalist, somehow he got the virus too. And the other night he told his audience how awful it was and how scared he became. Now, whether you like Chris Cuomo or not, that doesn't matter. The important thing is to understand that this virus cares nothing about your name or where you live. That's why it's so scary. It's also important to know that it's okay to panic and feel overwhelmed. That's part of being human. You don't need to feel bad about that. It's going to happen. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? Well, here's what I've learned that I think can help. First, if you were to list all the things that you care about or what you're concerned about, I think that list would be pretty long, right? You'd probably throw in COVID-19 into that list too. Then there's the things that you both care about and you can actually influence. Well, that's a smaller list. And then there are the things we can actually control. Well, those are a lot fewer in number, but they matter a lot because they're under our control. Now, instead of lists, let's look at them as circles within each other. So the biggest circle is your circle of concern. Then inside of that is your circle of influence, and smaller still is your circle of control. You see, when you're facing a crisis or a panic moment, like I did the other day, this is where you need to focus, on your circle of control. This can bring you out of panic mode because those are the things that you can be confident about what the outcome is going to be. Now, what does all this mean anyway? Okay, well, let me give you a few examples about what I'm trying to say. A few weeks ago, when the stories got more intense and we got more worried about the virus spreading all over the world until it was actually finally labeled a worldwide pandemic, we realized, you know what? The number one priority for us is to protect Ben from getting that virus. So we did 3 things that were inside our circle of control. The first was deciding to limit who came into our home, and that included caregivers and family members. Ben's team of caregivers, which we call Team Ben, includes 6 people. Now, we knew it didn't make sense to have all 6 people coming and going. I mean, you've seen the graphs, how the spread grows exponentially, right? So we decided to only have 2 members of Team Ben care for him at different times. even though everyone is healthy and feeling fine. We needed to control who came into our home and who didn't. And that would mean that there would be a minimum number of interactions that his team would actually have with others outside our home, which theoretically should reduce the chances of anyone bringing the virus to him. And Ben is the only person they care for too, so that helps. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we put in place was being super diligent, almost to the point of being annoying, with what we would call extreme sanitizing. That meant that every time anyone entered the house, and that included me and Jan, they had to do 4 things. The first was they had to hang up their outerwear at the back door so it didn't enter the house. The second thing is they had to change their outside shoes, we call them, into their inside ones, which they left at our house. The third is that they had to wash and scrub their hands for those 20 seconds that everyone's talking about. I posted actually a really good instructional video on Team Ben I found on how to do that. So everyone's doing that. And last, they had to clean their cell phones, their wallets, their purses, and anything else they brought in with the sanitizing wipes, and then wash their hands again. Sounds extreme, I know. Oh, I left out one other step. We got rid of our hand towels too, and now we only use paper towels to dry our hands and wash or dry in our dishes, so we can discard those easily too. You see, protecting Ben is in our circle of control. That's our priority right now, and we can have control over that. We can tell people to come or to go, and the way we choose to do that has everything to do with really just stopping the spread of the virus at our back door, short of locking those doors to everyone until the pandemic is all over, and that doesn't make any sense. Now maybe you're asking, well, what if his caregivers actually have the virus and you don't know about it? They're asymptomatic. Shouldn't they wear a mask or something and so they don't expose Ben to it? Well, I suppose, but at the same time, we know that Ben's caregivers are minimizing their exposure to the outside world just like we are. And in our city, most are adhering to self-isolation and the physical distancing. But also, isn't it possible that even if he got the virus, that he could also be asymptomatic, right? I don't believe any expert knows why some are and some aren't. Well, at the end of the day, there's no guarantees, but if we're all staying away from people as much as possible and washing our hands really well, then the risk has to be low of getting it one way or the other. But you see what's also happening here, kind of indirectly, by enforcing this extreme sanitizing regimen. We're actually influencing a change in Ben's caregivers' behavior. Not that they weren't focused on their hygiene before, they absolutely were. But now it's the most important thing in their mind as soon as they walk through the door, whether they like it or not, because they know how important it is to protect Ben. And taking this one step further, by changing their behavior, we're actually having an impact on the way things are that we care about slowing the spread of the virus, which is in our circle of concern. So quick sidebar, if you want to learn more about these circles I'm talking about, check out Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's all under Habit 1. You see, focusing on your circle of control is part of winning the next shift. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the Soaring Families website and you'll find a short video there all about the 4 coping strategies that we've learned over the years that work no matter what. So bottom line, when you sense those panicky feelings and that overwhelmed feeling starting to take over, always remember that there are things that are in your control. Figure out what those are. And if you focus on those, you can almost always pull yourself out of that downward spiral that I was in. One other thing, make sure you reach out to your healthcare workers and the people in the grocery stores and all the frontline people that are putting themselves at risk to keep this world going so that we can all get through it. They deserve our support every single day. Take care and be well.